We all have opinions about many things in life, but are we doing our best to make our opinions clear to the people who matter? That is what RL1 RI1 Making a Point is all about. So this particular target asks that we can make an inferential point using the strongest quotes and examples from multiple parts of the text, including determining where the text leaves matters uncertain. So we've got quite a bit going on here, and we're going to unpack that in future slides. At the 2 level, you are still making an that should be inferential or explicit point, but you're only providing proof from one part of the text, and you are still determining where matters are uncertain. At the 1 level, you're able to make a point that is logical, okay, and it could be explicit or inferential. At the 4 level, you would like to be above your grade level proficiency. Not only are you making an inferential point with strong quotes and determining where matters are uncertain, but you're also helping to reveal the big picture. And this is more even than talking about theme. It's talking about the overall impact of a text on the world. So the first thing we need to clarify, and this will be to get anything above a 1, is what is the difference between explicit and inferential as far as making a point? Well, explicit is simply what the text says. You're just paraphrasing what the text says. You're not coming up with anything new as far as your side of the deal. You're not really giving an opinion in that sense. An inference is what the text says combined with what you know. And just a different way to think about this, many of us do this all the time, right? A doctor will listen to your symptoms. Those are the explicit details that you provide. And then a doctor will consult the background knowledge that he or she has. That might be a medical book. It might just be knowledge in his or her own brain. And finally, the doctor will give a diagnosis. And that is the inference. It's looking at what you say with what they know and giving you, this is what I think is wrong. A detective will work in much the same fashion. A detective will examine the evidence of a case, think about how all that evidence relates to prior experience and prior cases, and then present a theory of the crime. And again, that would be the inference, combining what the detective already knows with what is being presented in front of him or her in this particular case. We also need to consider the strength of examples. To be proficient in this particular target, you'll need to have strong examples. Weak examples, this is what I don't want to see, have little impact on the text. They're little nitpicky details that don't really matter. You could take them out of the story, it wouldn't be a big deal. In some cases, especially if you're talking about poetry, they might only occur once, and they might relate to minor characters and or evidence. Strong examples have a major impact on the text, tend to be repeated, and relate to major characters and or evidence. So we're looking for things that would totally change the story if we took them out. This particular target also asks you to address when matters are uncertain. In other words, what about those lingering questions? And you're going to find quite a few of those in grade level texts. So you'll want to consider, as far as finding what those uncertain matters are, questions that are not answered, characters who have no clear resolution, or opportunities where multiple possibilities exist. You'll also, this is key here, want to consider why the author left these matters uncertain. It's not enough to acknowledge, oh, well, this didn't get answered, but you want to think about why. Generally, it's for a purpose. Is it to build a sense of mystery? Is it to help reveal some complexity about human nature? You need to determine that. We're going to take a look at our poem example from the literature targets here. This is Dulce et Decorum Est from Wilfred Owen. And I'll read through the poem, and then we'll do a 1, 2, 3, and 4 level analysis on it. The poem. Bent double, like old beggars under sacks, knock-kneed, coughing like hags, we cursed through sludge, till on the haunting flares we turned our backs, and toward our distant rest began to trudge. Men marched asleep, many had lost their boots, but limped on, bloodshod. All went lame, all blind, drunk with fatigue, deaf even to the hoots of tired, outstripped 5-9s that dropped behind. Gas, gas, quick, boys! An ecstasy of fumbling, fitting the clumsy helmets just in time, but someone still was yelling out and stumbling, and floundering like a man in fire or lime. Dim through the misty panes and thick green light, as under a green sea I saw him drowning. In all my dreams, before my helpless sight, he plunges at me, guttering, choking, drowning. If in some smothering dreams you too could pace behind the wagon that we flung him in and watch the white eyes writhing in his face, his hanging face like a devil's sick of sin, if you could hear at every jolt the blood come gargling from the froth-corrupted lungs, obscene as cancer, bitter as the cut of vile, incurable sores on the innocent tongues, my friend, you would not tell with such high zest to children ardent for some desperate glory the old lie, dulce et decorum est pro patria more. And thus ends the poem. So if I were to do just a one-level analysis, I simply need to make my point. And for the sake of our explicit versus inferential, we'll play with that a little bit. I could do an explicit point here and simply say, this poem talks about a man dying. Okay, man dies from gas. Or you should say, even gets ill. It doesn't talk about him actually dying. Man sick from gas. Okay, it's what the poem is about. No themes. I'm not combining it with what I know. I can see this quite clearly. Someone's still yelling out and stumbling. He's drowning in the gas. That's all right there, explicit. Now, inferentially, I need to start combining this with what I know. And while Owen never directly says, oh, this is during a war, this is very clear to us. So we might make some kind of comment there combined with what we're reading here. And we could say, war is a dangerous time. Does Owen directly say that? No, but he's showing us, and we can understand through our own experience that this is about war. So we see the dangers of war. And if we're looking for a big picture here, I think we could very easily say, knowing that this poem is showing us how dangerous war is, that this is an anti-war propaganda piece. Okay. And now we get into looking for evidence to provide proof for that particular piece, and we want to look all throughout the piece. So we can start with the very basics here. We're looking at the verbs. They're coughing, they're sick, they're bent double, they're cursing through the sludge, they're lame, they're blind. So we might say war damages the body, and then use that section that I just underlined to prove it. From the midsection, we might say war can totally destroy. We're talking about what happened to this man. He's drowning, he's floundering, yelling out and stumbling. All of those pieces, or kills, or destroys. We can make an inference that this man died. And then from the closing, well, actually I got two more here I'd like to highlight. He talks about his dreams even being still haunted, and he talks about what he sees. More impacts long after, and use again that underline section. And then we can again look at that very closing piece, the lie. Dulce et decorum est, which means it's honorable, basically, to die for your country. He calls out the lie. And we would use that final underline quote to prove that. So there is our strong proof for our point that this is an anti-war poem. We also need to address what matters are uncertain. And I guess what's most uncertain here is the final outcome, both for our narrator. I mean, this is a very clear narrator. He talks about my own dreams and all of my dreams. We might wonder what happened to him. Clearly, he survived this incident. Did he go on to actually fight against the war movement? Did he go home and try and convince people to stop the war? These are the questions we might ask. And it's relevant because of the poem's existence itself. Did he write this poem as a reflection of his own experience just for him to cope with it? Or did he write it hoping that it would be published and that people would stop fighting, would stop sending their sons and their daughters off to the war effort? These things matter if we're talking about an anti-war poem, just what happened to our narrator. And is that narrator even Owen? Is he writing from his own experience or not? This is all unclear, and it could have a pretty big impact on how this poem was used.